Brace for impact. As the vessel starts to fill with ice-cold water, my heart is pounding through my chest. It's at this point I realize there's no going back. One hand grips my harness tightly, the other one is shaking on the window, which will be my only escape. The water's at my chest now, and at any minute, the vessel will capsize and I'll be submerged. Tears are rolling down my cheeks. I take in a deep breath. The plan? Calmly, or as calmly as possible, wait for the vessel to fill with water completely before undoing my harness, breaking through the glass, and swimming to my escape. The reality? Well, maybe it's easy to go back to the start. As a child, I didn't need much to keep me entertained. Put me in the corner with a good book, and I would stay there for hours. Valley of Adventure, River of Adventure. I found my heroes in the pages of these books and more. But little did I know that my biggest role model was just above those pages. Quick, put BBC Two on. We're going to miss the start. As a wide-eyed 8-year-old girl with a passion for science and exploration and a big imagination, I found my hero and my role model in the most unlikely of places. Dave Lister, fellow Scouser, and his motley crew absolutely captivated me with their deep space adventures. You see, Dave wasn't just any TV character, he was me, in a way. Or at least who I aspired to be, minus his love of Vindaloo curries and beers. A fellow space explorer from Liverpool. Back then, confessing your dream to become an astronaut was like announcing that you wanted to become a dragon tamer or a superhero or something. And I still remember the laughter that echoed through the classroom when I announced this cosmic dream for the first time. Jackie, choose something more realistic, my teacher said, as I sat next to a self-proclaimed Premier League football player and a world-renowned actress. And I couldn't quite understand what made their dreams more realistic than mine. To me, there was nothing more real than the pull of the stars. And so from then on, I kept my astronaut dream a secret, believing that maybe one day, if my grades were good enough at school, the government would scout me out like they do with secret agents in the movies, and I would become an astronaut after all. This belief propelled me through university, where I studied mathematics and later theoretical particle physics, becoming not only the first person in my family to go to and graduate from university, but the first doctor too. After completing my PhD, I stood at a crossroads, the voice of my childhood teacher echoing in my mind, nudging me towards that real career. And just as I was beginning to lose all hope, something amazing happened. Scrolling through social media, I came across this advert from the BBC looking for 12 men and women from across the UK to undergo astronaut training and see if they had what it took to become an astronaut. I could not believe my eyes. My heart was racing. Could this be my chance to finally show people, to show that teacher that maybe I do have what it takes after all? I ran to my friends and family with the advert and asked them, what do you think? Now, my family have always been quite supportive of my crazy ambitions ever since I was a kid, so they were all for it. My friends, on the other hand, laughed and told me, you've got no chance. Despite the naysayers, I took the leap and sent in my application, trusting in the motto that has guided me through life. You can't win unless you put yourself in the race. Now, it was up to fate to decide. A few months later, after divulging over 10 years of medical records and undergoing some grueling tests, all while being psychoanalyzed, I received the call. Out of over 3,000 hopefuls, I'd been selected as one of the final 12. After all those years of secretly dreaming, I was going to get my shot at seeing if I had what it took to become an astronaut. Now, what I learned most about the process is that astronaut training is not always as it seems. The first test was to hover a helicopter. With only stick figure drawings as our guide, We attempted what even seasoned pilots find daunting. It was an exercise in humility and resilience, as each of us, one by one, grappled with the controls and ultimately with failure. You see, the test was not about how well or how quickly we mastered the hover, but how well we dealt with failing. You see, it's a common misconception that astronauts have never failed. They've went through life smoothly, perfectly, achieving A-star grades throughout life, when actually the opposite is true. They've built that resilience and they've failed so many times that when the time matters, they know how not to fail. They know how to succeed. Your entire training pushes you to your limits, but it's your attitude that's different. Where the average person might fail a couple of times and give up, you persevere. I remember walking into a room not knowing what was going to happen when Chris Hadfield, former commander of the International Space Station and first Canadian astronaut, came over to greet me. His handshake was firm, his presence commanding, and his role pivotal. He was to be the judge of our potential. The test was a memory test, required to repeat an ever-growing sequence of numbers backwards while stepping on and off a step. It was a dance of cognitive and physical agility, a test of both balance and information recall, and one that's designed so that everyone ultimately fails. I remember finishing the test, and Chris Hadfield said, "You should be really proud of how far you've come," before he pointed to the door. My heart sank. And as I went out into the corridor, I was left for a moment by myself with my own thoughts, and I thought, I'm going home. I haven't done enough. As a mathematician, I should have done so much better. Just as I was beginning to get the hang of the emotional and the mental and the physical pressures put upon me, my worst nightmare happened. Pulling up next to a lake, those of us who remained in the competition piled off a minibus and went into a nearby room. Inside the room were tables, and on those tables were pieces of paper lying face down. And of course, when I thought no one was looking, I took a little sneak peek. What I saw was horrifying. The words "underwater helicopter survival experience" were at the top of that page. Words that, in my opinion, should never be allowed to go together in a sentence. My heart sank and I was petrified. I could feel it pounding through my chest. And thanks to the heart rate monitors that we were all required to wear, the camera people knew that too. Everyone zoned in on me. And as much as I tried to hide that fear with the best poker face I could do, I had no chance. Despite my best efforts to stay calm under pressure, I just couldn't do it. I was terrified. Again, another popularized misconception about the ideal astronaut candidate is that you have to remain calm all the time. Of course we panic, and of course we have to overcome that panic, but it's years of training that can do that. Dressed in what I can only describe as underwater helicopter survival experience gear, I get into this container and strap myself in. I am honestly petrified. At any moment, I'm going to hit the surface. It's going to begin filling with water, and everything around me will just be freezing cold, filled with water, and absolutely terrifying. The plan? Hold my breath, calmly unstrap myself out of my harness, push through the glass or the window here where you see the X, and swim calmly to the surface. The reality: I can do this, I can do this. My breathing's becoming faster, a bit more laboured. I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Breathe, 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 you've got this. I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't swim. Suddenly, I take in a whole lungful of water, just at the perfect moment of going under. And as I'm struggling to get out, struggling to undo my harness and break through the glass, before the capsule is filled with water, so before the pressure is equalized, my swimming skills or lack of swimming skills become painfully apparent for everybody else observing. I start to sink back down. I can't get to the top. Out of nowhere, a hand reaches, pulls me up, for which I'm extremely grateful for, as I'm coughing and spluttering in their face, and I manage to just open my eyes just a little bit to see a familiar sight. A moustache. Not just any moustache. The moustache of one Canadian astronaut, Chris Hadfield, who at the time I'd believed had dived in to rescue me from drowning. Little did I know he was there in stealth mode the whole time, witnessing the whole thing. I don't know what's more embarrassing. And so I was absolutely mortified. I wanted the world to just swallow me up. And there was nothing more embarrassing than this, than the fact that they used that scene in the open credits of every single episode that aired for the show, much to my friends' delight. Now, as I exited the pool, the silence was deafening. No one told me what to do. I'm shaking, I'm soaking wet, I've got a lung full of water. No one says anything at all. You could hear a pin drop. It's at that point I realized I needed to climb back in and do it all again, which I did to the disbelief of myself and the judges 3 more times. Now, of course, Chris told me off that day for doing something that astronauts would never do, which is putting themselves and the lives of their crew in danger. You see, in a real scenario, by trying to escape a sinking vessel too soon and not allowing for the pressure to equalize, you cause more water to rush in and you cause the thing to sink much faster, putting everyone's lives in danger. At the same time, Chris also acknowledged my bravery, though I didn't feel very brave that day. But I did learn a valuable lesson about the fine line between courage, bravery, and recklessness. I passed the following test with flying colours, which involved taking off our boots, undoing our laces, sitting in a tiny, tiny sphere, counting to 20 minutes in our minds while lacing these boots back up in complete darkness, to manoeuvre in the ExoMars, the prototype ExoMars rover, which Tim Peake himself did as part of his Principia mission when he was on board the International Space Station in 2015. And just as I was starting to feel like I belonged in the competition, the pool beckoned once more. Our task was to simply swim 2 lengths and to tread water for 10 to 12 minutes, something that I just could not do. And so it was here, amidst the ripples of the pool, that my journey on the show came to an end. In the months that followed, I grappled with feelings of failure. The skill that had undone me was one that so many people take for granted, and so many people learn as children, swimming. I was so embarrassed. What was I going to do when this comes out on telly? How is everyone in Liverpool going to react when they know that I left because I can't swim? For the first time in my life, I wanted to give up on my dream. 6 months later, the programme aired. Astronauts Do You Have What It Takes was everywhere. Magazine articles, local newspapers, radio, TV adverts. I pulled myself together and braced myself for the episode of my departure. I was expecting a wave of criticism, and holding my breath, I relived that sinking experience, holding back the tears in my eyes. I waited for the criticism to come. Instead, I was engulfed by a tide of support. People that I'd never met before reached out to me on social media to commend me on my bravery and have heartfelt admiration for my courage. They even offered to teach me to swim for free. Parents got in touch the days, the weeks, even the years following the episode to say that thanks to watching me drowning on TV, they'd faced their fears and they'd signed up to swimming lessons, and now for the first time, they've managed to swim with their kids on holiday. I realized at that moment that me leaving the competition at that time was exactly the right moment to go, to have that impact. And so success was not about proving whether I could be an astronaut or not, whether to myself or the people in my past. It was about inspiring courage and change in others, something I'm extremely proud of. This was another life-changing moment as I realized what's quite important for me in my career and in my life and what can bring me joy. Now, as I lead large-scale educational programs to support people from underrepresented groups to reach their own ambitions and dreams, it's what makes me most happy. And so, although I still dream of becoming the first Scouser in space, it's the journey along the way that matters most, and the surprises that might come along the way as well, and the challenges that are coming up too. Studies conducted in microgravity and on board the International Space Station hold the key to curing health conditions here on Earth and helping millions and millions of people in the future. And I do hope to one day be part of that too. But as I said, for now, it's the journey and the people I inspire along the way that's most important to me, and the people that inspire me too. Oh, and the fear of drowning on national television? Well, it taught me that there's nothing more liberating than facing your fears head on. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and it's fascinating. I've got a number of different questions. Unfortunately, I don't have time for them all. But what is it about? Because that whole underwater helicopter, thing, that's a well-known thing that freaks a lot of people out. It's not just limited to yourself, right?
Yeah.
And what is it about that? Because as an outside observer, obviously I haven't been through it. Especially since, obviously if you were on an actual helicopter that crashed in the ocean, that would obviously be at least kind of scary, but you obviously know what's coming. So what is it about that experience that freaks out so many people?
I think it's a combination of things. If someone does want to do that, you can pay to do that as well as like a day out. So maybe that's like a gift. I found this out afterwards. Maybe that's a gift voucher that you buy your worst enemies or something. I don't know. Or if you fancy a challenge. But I think it's a combination of things. I think water scares a lot of people. Being in enclosed spaces scares a lot of people. The fact that you're strapped in, you're wearing all of this stuff, you feel quite enclosed. And then, of course, when you get to a certain point, it simulates what would happen if you're in a helicopter or something that would go into the water. And it will capsize. And so you're not only in the water, some people are quite comfortable with that, but you're upside down as well. Yeah. You can also get the simulations where lights are off, you've got strobe lights, there's noises happening at the same time, lots of different things.
I guess it's designed to freak you out, basically.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And I know pilots have to do this as part of their training, so they, any pilots on this competition had a bit of an upper hand, I think, if they've done this before. Yeah. I'd never done anything like it. I'd barely been in the pool because I can't swim, so for me it was extremely terrifying.
Now, you talk about resilience as kind of one of the key themes of this. For those colleagues, whether it be in the context of this training or otherwise, how did that lack of resilience manifest itself, would you say?
You mean lack of resilience for... Because I think I've got quite good resilience.
Yeah.
But in the sense of, I've had a lot of people in my life maybe try and protect me by saying like, oh no, you shouldn't, apply for Cambridge, or you shouldn't do this, we don't really fit in there. And so in a way of protecting me, it's, prevented me from seeking those opportunities even further. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's also, I've come across these situations where it has built my resilience, and I have been told, no, you can't do this, or people from Liverpool don't become astronauts, or whatever it is. Sure. And I think that there's people who, if they're put against those situations very early in life, they can build that resilience. Mm-hmm. Now, where I work, I teach students who are in their 20s who've never failed at anything. Yeah. And so they don't have that resilience, and it's really hard for them to pick themselves back up. Yeah. And so I think it's a skill you can develop, but maybe, not to say everyone should have a rough childhood, but maybe if you have more instances where you come across barriers more, you will have that resilience more naturally.
So there's an AI company called NVIDIA, which you may have come across. So the CEO of it was recently interviewed at Stanford University. I think it might have been Stanford Business School or something like that. And he was talking about, he was saying, I think he may be a product of the Stanford system, but he talked about one of the biggest problems with Stanford graduates is they are superstars at their age, and they've only known superstardom throughout their entire history. Just getting into Stanford these days is a superstar act, which means they are incredibly unresilient when they eventually, if they ever are going to be doing the kind of innovation that NVIDIA are trying to do, they will meet failure eventually.
Yeah.
And when it happens, they evidently, according to this fella, are amongst the first to crack it and really have a tough time recovering from it if they recover at all.
Yeah, and this is why we see this with our students as well in high-performing universities. And this is why it's good to put yourselves in those situations where you can build that resilience, or your colleagues or your workforce, so they can build that. So it's not a huge breakdown when something goes wrong. Yeah. And that's why they try and test it with Astronaut, and they weed it out quite quickly, because they want someone to go, right, okay, I failed, but let's start again. Where did I get it wrong? Let's do this again, without getting so worked up. Because the last thing you want if you're in space and there's a emergency is that domino effect where everything just goes wrong. Yeah. You need to just pick yourself up and go again, as hard as it is internally when you're angry. You know?
And did you feel that experience helped your resilience?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot in the experience that maybe gave a false sense of like more resilience. So for example, when we were in the helicopters, although I was failing at that task, I was quite annoyed that I was failing at that task because I wanted to get it right. But I was overjoyed to be in a helicopter and be in the whole situation. That sort of overrode the frustration in a way.
Nice. Thank you so much.
No,
Great to see you again. Cheers.